title academy. That's pretty
That's
interesting.
scary, actually.
That's pretty interesting.
Like he said, it was tradition, but there's nothing documented.
Let's go to the back, let's go to the back here. Speak loud.
I do believe the issue is partially a race issue, but I also believe it's a training problem. And for one, with recent events and the climate of racism in this country, you have more people in the public doing research on what the laws are. And if you ever notice in the videos where you have conflict between police officers and people who are getting pulled over, it's always a discrepancy in what the law is. The cop will pull the person over and they'll say one thing, the person will be on the other side of the window saying, you have no right to pull me over, this is what the law is. And my thing is, to be a lawyer, you have to go to school for a number of years. But to be a police officer and uphold the same laws, how long is the training?
60 credits. You need 60 credits at.
Not nearly as long as being
Correct.
a lawyer,
Then you
correct?
have the
So then
academy.
you have people who are police officers who don't necessarily know the law inside out and make mistakes. And then you have these
Granted,
issues all
everybody
the
can make
time.
mistakes.
Yeah, no, I understand,
Nobody,
but I think it's a
almost
training.
20 years of experience, and I don't know the law completely.
And that's why you have court to sort it out. We make the mistake of challenging that authority in the field. That's where it goes bad. If I stop you and you try to distract me, well, you don't have a right to stop me or anything like that, I'm taking that as a distraction. You got something else going on that you don't want me to know about. That's how it's handled most often. So the
But
thing
you
is,
see where the person is.
one of the mistakes is to challenge that officer in the field. That's why you have the right to go to court. Take that ticket, go to court. You look at his badge number, look at his name. Go make a formal complaint if he was out of line. You have these things. I know at my department in Wilmington, that is heard. It will be respected. You as a citizen would be respected, and your complaint would be honored.
So let me ask you this. I think one of the sentiments from the crowd that we're not speaking to is when you make a complaint or you deal with it not in the moment, how come that burden is solely resting on citizens and the accountability and the burden isn't resting with behind the blue shield? And this is what I mean specifically by that. When I worked at probation, specifically knew when people crossed the line, specifically knew when jokers went too far. And no one would ever step up and go to their supervisor or rally behind a real complaint that came in there and say, no, I heard him joking about it. He hit the person, they were in cuffs, but we constantly put the burden back on the citizens. I guess part of the sentiment is what needs to happen behind the blue shield for accountability to happen, but also so officers don't have to go it alone and be put out of their job for going against the current. And is that a real current or just a perceived current?
I don't have the answer to that. No, I think, just to add on to that, and I'll pass the mic, but I wanted to go back just real quick and just kind of piggyback and agree with the young lady who just spoke. I think that's the real issue. It's systemic and it's a deeper problem. And I think, we're talking about, it's just not the police and the citizen. And it goes back to also what was said earlier about perceptions. And at the end of the day, there are perceptions, and we could say, okay, we'll just take it to court. But we also have to understand the judicial system is not just either. It's not fair, and there's also racism within that. And that's clear because statistics show that African American men are incarcerated at greater rates for the same crimes. And for the same crimes, we're going to get more time. So it's easy to say, okay, well, just comply, but even if I comply and end up in the justice system, I'm in church almost, and I still get screwed, but at the end of the day, I'm still screwed. So those are the questions that I have. How do we rewrite the narrative? How do we start having this dialogue that speaks to all of these systems? Because you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years systematic oppression on a race. And we can't just go case by case. Because if you look at the case that happened in Minnesota with Castile, what's his name? I want to say his name. Philando. He, from what I've seen, he complied and did what he was told to do. He was told to reach and produce his license, and he was shot. So again, and I know that's not the situation and everything, but but we also have to deal with, that's why the outrage is here. That's why we're sitting here tonight, because we keep having these events, I'll say, where people are being killed, and there has to be a way that we deal with the real narrative, because we understand it's not always, but it shouldn't be at all.
One thing I will say for law enforcement, we believe that Philando complied and that's what he was asked. I think what law enforcement would say is, we really don't know yet, but we can just say we believe this happened rather than accepting it as a fact first.
Thank you for answering that part. I was just about to say that.
Can I say what you said? So I agree with that, but my point is, again, I feel even if we don't know all the facts, what I do know, I feel it was excessive. Because even if he was reaching and you thought he was going to get something, were 4 shots necessary? Was there another way, in your training, is there another way to de-escalate a situation without 4 gunshots or 6 gunshots?
No. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say the way we were trained is the situation presents in fatal force, you respond with fatal force. Sometimes we're kind of, you know, you see articles about could they have shot to wound. Nobody's really that good with a gun unless they're training every day. So in terms of how the training is, and I'm gonna be honest, I had a situation where I called law enforcement to my house. It was a situation where I felt perpetrators outside the house had guns. I don't want them double tapping. They can quadruple tap. They can end that threat. Because what happens is if they throw one bullet, it can hit anybody. That's my personal perspective. Please share it.
Well, we talked about the root and wow, we discussed a lot. I think the main thing, what we want to do is, or at least what I want to say, is we talk about how the citizens can do this and the citizens can do that, and then the Blue Shield. I just want to say, don't get in trouble. Don't do anything that's going to get you in trouble. And then on top of that, we need to, it's interesting because we talk about, I'm trying to recall what was said, influences. There are so many influences out there. Our young kids, when we talk about in the field and don't question in the field, they're not told that. They're not taught that. They're not taught to be polite to adults anymore because they have a lot of hip hop artists out there that say rah rah, you know, like a Dungeon Dragon. And it's sad because those same people are not telling, you know, our young black men and women to get an education. They're saying your education is on the street, but it's not. Because we don't want racism to be there. And I mean, if we want racism to cease and desist, then we all need to get on the same level. And we're not going to be on that level if we don't get an education. If our, you know, if our influences don't tell us to do that.
I just want to say quickly, we're going to be running out of time. We want to get everybody's questions in, so we want the questions to move quickly and the answers to move quickly. But quickly, I want to add another dimension because I know what the crowd is saying from this perspective. We keep saying, well, maybe if he would have did this or did that, but that doesn't explain all of them. That doesn't explain Tamir Rice, kid in the park playing with a toy gun who just got pulled up and shot. He had no chance to comply to anything. So I understand what we're saying. But I want to add just another dimension because we're talking about what's going on in the world and, you know, about systemic racism. But the problem is the church is supposed to lead the way for what the rest of the world is supposed to do in behavior and character. It is almost hypocritical for us to have conversations about race relations when the most segregated time in America is on Sunday morning. The most segregated time ever is Sunday morning. We go to the black church, we go to the white church, we go to the Latina church, and we do not mix at all. So I thank God that this is one of the first steps, because if the church doesn't start the way, it's never going to be answered anywhere else. Amen? All right, that was just my little. We got one in the back here. We're going to move this quickly.
I just want to stand up and say, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to do this. But we have to get back to the main thing, being the main thing, and that is fear. And it is division. It is division. And it is the church. It's like he said, it is the church. everybody is going and doing their own thing, and nobody has any respect for authority anymore. Not in the home, not outside the home, and we're talking, and we're talking to these police officers. And I thank God that y'all are here. I mean, God bless you. Much respect. But you don't even speak from where you are. You can't speak because there's other police officers that do nothing like y'all. And this is the thing, is that we're all looking at, we can't look at everybody in the blue outfits as being bad, just because one made a mistake. It's the same way, just like with us in color. Somebody of color, does one thing, they look at the whole group. We can't do that, and we can't do it either. As people that are living for the Lord Jesus Christ, we can't do it. We cannot. So the thing is that change. What are we going to change? We have to change us. Humble ourselves. We have to. If we don't, we're not going to survive. And how can we help somebody else that's out there in the world? We're not going to be able to do it. So we have to humble ourselves. That's key. And you're like, well, man, we always go through everything. We have to go through so much. Guess what? We do. And guess what? It shows how strong we are, too. Got to stand together, keep pushing, love everyone, and not sit there, because we have to be, look, the Lord has us here for a purpose and a reason. We have to move in that. And we have to show that we live for the Lord. Let's not show that we, show a God he's not a dead God, he's alive, first of all. And we have to show that. I'm just so all over the place, but I'm just saying, I know that it stems from, let me tell you something, it's not going to change. It's racism. Yes. It's been forever. Go back in the Bible, you see it there too. It's been there. And I'm not saying that we're supposed to embrace it, but I'm saying that we have to love one another, and everybody is not the same. Everybody is not the same. Amen.
This question, because I was battling with this all week long. This question is for police officers. For any civilian, citizen, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, for a police officer, what is the proper protocol to conduct when you pull over a citizen and they aren't licensed to carry and they tell you that they are?
And I've actually dealt with this several times over the years. And when they're forthright, because I typically would not be asking that question unless there was just some indicator that there's something not right in the car. But I've had several people over the years tell me that. I'm a licensed carry holder. I have my gun is on my hip, my gun's under my seat. I'll ask them, would you just step out of the car? Let's go. I'm going to take them away from where the weapon is. I can verify that. They show me their permit. I'll secure the weapon if they're comfortable with that. His safety is not in jeopardy. My gun's not even coming out at this point in time because nothing has escalated. So there's a simple way to handle it, and it's on how your interactions are with us. Because I think as this gentleman here has spoken, we're going to escalate to your level of escalation. So, when things are handled and you respect me and I respect you, our encounter's over in 5 minutes.
I would also say to that, Jason, a great source of information when you have questions about firearms and safety and concealment and carry. Cabela's, even though they get a bad rep, they have people who are knowledgeable about your state laws. And so in Delaware, it's an open carry state where some people will say you can ride with it right on your seat. But Jason's question is, how do I become safe? As an officer, we were taught to separate our ammo, and for personal protection, you can keep one in the chamber. If that's applicable to your state, and you explain a process and a protocol to law enforcement, it more times than not, it should go better for you because you're being intentional, but you're also demonstrating that you're trying to carry and produce it in a safe way. An officer feels safe that his ammo is not in the gun. It's just a takeaway. Not that we should have to do it, but if we want to be intelligent, it's a takeaway.
And I don't want to gloss over what we talked about previously is, for anybody's question, how do we deal with racism in the church? I was shocked and appalled at Jimmy Swagger, who just came out and said that the way that we should deal with the race rioters is what he called them. He said if they start destroying property, they should be shot on sight. That's in the church. So these issues have to be addressed also. I'm gonna go back to.
I just kind of had more of like a statement, but because I came in late, so I don't really know what we discussed. But I think, you know, some of the issue, you know, as far as the brutality and the unnecessary things that police have done has to do with how police are being policed and how they're being judged. Because, you know, if there's really no punishment for them when they are out of line, then it doesn't create an incentive for them to really watch and consider how they're handling us. You know, like I've had situations and I actually have paperwork where you can read the paperwork and see where things don't line up and things don't match. But, you know, the person who did the investigation didn't report it and it wasn't, you know, investigated further and judged. So you have police that have really gotten away with murder when, you know, it's right here in the paperwork that stories don't match up, and you can match it up yourself just by reading. So it's like when are they going to be? When is going to be cracked down on how the police are operating, and you know what I mean, and that be judged. You know what I mean, and like the other thing, like when it's an unarmed suspect or whatever, you know, police have pepper spray, a baton, a taser, and then a gun. So, you know, why is the gun being pulled out first rather than the pepper spray or the baton or the taser? You know?
My question is, in light of everything that's happened, what are police departments doing now? In light of everything that has happened, what are police departments doing now? My basic thought behind everything that happened, change begins within. If I'm sitting here looking at my white sister, we should be able to have a discussion without her getting angry, without me getting angry, and I need to say to you, you know, this is how I feel. Do you understand how I feel? And she'll tell me how she feels. And when it's all said and done, we should be able to come to the conclusion that we're just both human beings trying to make it. But you got to validate this fact that I have these feelings. So my bottom line is, what are we doing as individuals to make it better? What is the police department doing as individuals to make it better? And people don't understand that I grew up in the South, and I remember traveling with my father. He picked us up from Delaware, and we were going back to Virginia. And I got scared because the police pulled over. He told us, shut up, be quiet, don't say anything. I didn't see anything that he had done wrong. They took him off, they pulled him back. We had to sit out in this little whatever while they took him back. And I still have that little fear in the back of my mind. I even told my son when he went to the South, you gotta watch yourself. He went to school in the South. I said, you got to watch yourself. And so people need to understand that as African Americans, that's what we're still dealing with today. And why should I have to feel afraid simply because my skin is a different color?
I can say as your white sister that I grew up in the South. I grew up in Alabama, and I was never afraid. I was never afraid of when I did kind of, you know, iffy things when I was a teenager, and cops came around, but we were a bunch of white kids, and we weren't afraid, and we never got hurt.
So I think Linda's talking about white privilege. Sorry.
I kind of had a question about, is there like a rule that you have to go along with what your fellow police officer says or does? Because it seems like when police officers do wrong, their partners or the other cops that come don't tell them, you know, what you're doing is not right. They just let them continue doing it. So I just wanted to know, like, why is that?
No, ma'am, there is no rules, and that's just common sense. I mean, you can ask this officer right here. If something's not right, I'm going to tell him it's not right. And if I'm doing something wrong,
I expect him, even though, you know, he's under me in rank, to tell me I'm doing something wrong. So, you know, it's hard for us to kind of talk about the problems with all these other agencies when I just have experience with my agency. And I'm very proud of my agency because we don't have these problems, thank God.
I'm a proud Kenneth Squares in the room.
What can I do as someone who enjoys white privilege to be an ally and helpful to people who are Black and experiencing the racism that I agree is systemic, is unfair? I think there's a lot of things in powers in play to keep it exactly where it is or maybe make it worse. And I throw this out basically to the room if you want to talk to me afterwards, if it, you know, we don't want to take a lot of time for that right now. I just want to take, the only thing I can do is within my own community. I can't change the police department. I can't do the prison reform, I wish I could. But what can I do to be helpful and to make sure that people do know that Black lives matter?
Well, this is a great first step. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. I think one of the keys for all of us, and it's really the hard work because it's the one-on-one relationships that we have to form with one another, in order to understand each other. And I think what we were saying over here is exactly right. We have to tell our stories. And when we listen to each other's stories, believe them to be true. They are. There are experiences. And there's different ways of seeing the story. I get that. But believe me that your experience, I have to believe that's true in order to change my heart, in order for me to connect to you. And that is going to be, I think, the key. You know, last fall or last summer, I remember there was Black Lives Matter activists approached Secretary Clinton at an event and talked to her, and then she said, you know, you can't change hearts, you can only change systems and laws. And I completely disagree with her. As a politician, that's her job, fine. But my job as a minister, as a preacher, is to change hearts. And that's what I hope we can do.
Hi. So I'm a pediatrician and I do see a lot of African American kids, white kids, Asian kids. And I sort of started doing an anticipatory guidance where we talk about, you know, sunscreen, helmet. When I see my African American boys that I keep them close, that I like, you know, you guys dress properly, you know what to do. And all the moms are like, amen, yeah, you know, you gotta tell them. But it's so sad that that extra thing has to be told and they have to think different and fear for their kids because even really good kids and really good families still have that fear. Even if the families are middle class, upper middle class, still there's always that fear. And I think that I read an article that the police department over this country, there's so many different sections and units, and if you have a unit where the chief or the president or whoever the person is sort of racist, it sets the tone for everyone in that unit to be like that. And I have a lot of experience, quite a few feelings, speeding tickets, stopped by cops, white and black, gone to court, and the system is wonderful. I've never, you know, had cops who've been so good to me, and you know, I think it's great. But that doesn't explain the bad experiences of the bad cops maybe who were encouraged to be racist. You know, that's what is expected in a certain department. So is there any way there can be a centralization? Like in pediatrics, there's American Board of Pediatrics. They set the protocol for everything. This is how you treat this is how, and you have a standard of care. So if you don't meet the standard of care, you can get sued. So, and in the court of law, that's when a doctor is sued. That's what the question is. Did he meet the standard of care? And if he did it, then he can be liable. So, but apparently in the police department, is there a central protocol, a standard of care, which everyone is supposed to meet. And if they don't meet it, they are held accountable. So we don't say, you guys are great, your precinct is great, but someone else is nasty out there.
And again, that really will vary by organization when it comes down to it.
Policing is generally governed by the Department of Justice. So as a federal agency, there's a blanket of what policing is expected and what the laws are, and constitutional rights and everything for the United States. But then as you then start going down in levels to different states, different counties, different municipalities, there is no, you still have that overwhelming blanket of civil rights and federal rules, but things can change variously by agency to agency. So there is no set standard, I would say. So unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for that question for you.
Each state governs or mandates how many training hours you must complete just to become a police officer. And some agencies have initiated continuing education facets that are required for promotion and for different things. But your standard, like you said, is set at the federal level. But a lot of times each state gets to dictate how many hours of each thing is done.
Should that change?
Possibly. But the thing is, no matter how many rules you change, you gotta change that person in that uniform.
And you could have all the rules in the world, and that person has
He's
a
still
problem.
a human, that's gonna break
You're
the
just
rules.
gonna have a more well-trained man.
So, within that training, is there, I don't know, so, and I know it's a different review, is there diversity training as a part of that?
Yeah.
What type of diversity?
Well, I know at the agency I previously worked at, it's a huge diversity. There's it starts in the round of 6th, 7th week, and it's throughout the rest of the academy. They have different environments and different people come in and speak to make, for the kids that who are not from the city, get in tune to what's going on in town.
Let me ask this. I think maybe the audience is trying to figure out, we understand that there's great training in places, we have great law enforcement agencies on average. But the question is, with the glaring loopholes that allow, this rogue element to proliferate, how can citizens work with law enforcement people who are in it and know the loopholes to close some of them? Give you an example. So me and my wife were traveling to Orlando or somewhere, and we wanted to skip flag. So in other words, we were supposed to come back to Philly, but we wanted to get off in Baltimore. Totally allowed. I was talking with the lady at the front desk. I said, hey, this is my rights. I need my luggage. The police came up and said, well, you got to get out of here. So rather than argue with them, I just called 911 and asked to speak to the sergeant. So I said, you have cameras, you can look at their incidents, I even took several statements. Can you follow up? Can we go to IA? The gentleman said, well, why don't you come back tomorrow after you go to your wedding or whatever. I came back and his answer was, well, I'll just take care of it, I'll just handle it. I said, well, don't you have an IA department? So I guess what law-abiding citizens are saying, we know this happened. You guys know that happened. How can we, instead of complaining about it, I think people want it not only to be acknowledged, but how can we really close that loop with you? Because we understand some of you have to feed your families, and you can't just go against the tide yourself. But we do need a workable solution. Or do you acknowledge that that has happened?
I would say it happens, because it's human factor. We all have free will, so these things can happen. And then I can speak from experiences where I've been the big brother at a scene or in situations. We had gentlemen that come to church that I had contact with, and until he said, hey, he arrested me, I wasn't going to say anything, but he come and embraced me because of the way I treat him. I treat every person with respect. No, but that's me. People tell me we need more you around, but that's a choice in my free will. To be professional,
correct,
and to speak up when there's wrong.
Correct. So we're saying is, if we see taxes and officers are working sometimes 50, 60 hours a week, and you see it, how can we, our free will connect with your free will to say, hey, let's go after this road, that element together, rather than allow it to proliferate until it gets to a harmful situation.
You have more forums like this, and you don't try to do that while the officer is conducting an investigation or so on and so forth. You wait until they're off duty, or you ask to speak to the chief or the lieutenant. You don't do it in that moment, and you get stuff like this going. And then you build that bridge together, that way. With the, yeah.
And I
hate
guess
to-
you're saying that's the problem. You keep getting blocked at different levels, and you can't communicate what you're feeling
So
or what you're experiencing.
when I worked at the university, people would say, well, my son and daughter wants to get into engineering. How can I get into engineering? I would say, tell them to go in through and apply to be agribiz. You only need a 2-4. Everybody knows that you need a 3-1, but then you can transfer your major as you choose. That's a loophole. That's a back door. We don't know them, but a lot of times the response from law enforcement is, it's on you, take off work, go and do. And we're saying, how can we, create a force multiplier by unifying with you to get some accountability. And on the flip side, trust me, the piece that we haven't talked about, what the officers need us to do is, if you have friends that are, sniffing Xanax and doing extra things, when are you gonna ask for the accountability inside your own family that you're asking for from officers? But it seems like both sides are saying, well, let's focus on you. And the other side is saying, no, the citizens can do it. Where can we get there?
All right, I'm sorry, we had to cut this short. I wanted to get this last question from this young man before we wrap up with our unity prayer.
I think it's more of a subconscious thing, especially one of the majority things, like black kids like me who live in cities where stuff like this doesn't happen. We get fed by the media, and like she said about the music that we listen to, that all cops are bad, and that's not true. And on the other side, it's with cops too, because they hear horror stories about how they get guns pulled on them and all that, but it's not all of us. We kind of make a generalization of all cops are bad or all certain people are bad, and it's just more that one person or that one group of people that mess it up for all of us.
That's my nephew. Listen, I want to end this with our unity prayer, and I want to end it with my small editorial. In order for us to really reach unity, we have to learn how to call out the people within our ranks. Because the problem is we keep pointing across the table at the cops, and cops point across the table at the civilians, the blacks point across the table to the whites, and the whites point back to the blacks, and Republicans are pointing, and Democrats are pointing. But if we start calling out our own in our own ranks, if the cops start calling out the bad cops, and you know it's a bad shoot, please don't be on Facebook defending it if you know it wasn't a good shoot. You know it wasn't. And at the same time, we have our Black Lives Matter who quickly to call out the cops, but you need to start calling out the drug dealers in your community. You hire Black Lives Matter and you ain't pay child